All right, Photoshop artists, today we are here to talk about image adjustment command changes. These are typically for photo restoration. There are 8 steps in photo restoration, and if you are really interested in this, I strongly suggest you sign up for the photography class where we go into this more in depth. But for this, for us, is a general overview or a survey of these commands. You use them not just in photo restoration or retouching, but you're going to use them in pretty much almost every project you do from here on out. So let's get started by opening up this image here. I'm going to show you where it is. We're going to go to File, Open. You're going to click on Courses, Art, Computer Graphic Lessons, Photoshop Lessons. There's a folder in here called Photo Restoration, and you want the file called Image Adjustments. Image Adjustments. Okay, so that's this file here. Once you get it open, we're immediately going to save this in our cloud. So File, Save As. You are going to save to the Creative Cloud. You need to find where your Lessons folder is. And I'm going to call it Image Adjustments with my name. And hit Save. All right, and now we're ready to begin. So the first step and the first thing I'm going to show you is how to rotate the image. So first of all, we can see it's on its side, so we're going to need to rotate it. So we're going to go up to Image, Image Rotation, and we need to rotate this counterclockwise, which means going up like to the left. So we're going to go to 90 degrees counterclockwise. Okay, the other thing is I had already previously flipped this, but we're going to pretend like this was a selfie, which we know in selfie mode or camera mode, sometimes it's in reverse. So we're going to flip this. So we're going to go to Image Adjustments. Sorry, I lied. Image Rotation, flip canvas horizontally. All right, stop the video and do those 2 things now. All right, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to crop this thing and how to rotate it slightly. So we're going to grab the crop tool here. A couple things about the crop tool. You can change the options up here. So if I wanted to set this so that it was a fixed size, so let's say I know I am cropping this to fit in an 8x10 frame, I can click on it here. So it's going to constrain it so it only uses those proportions. I can also make sure it's set at the original size. I can put in a certain ratio. If I have a weird size, like I know I want it to be 4 inches by 8 inches, it's going to do that for me, okay? But if you did that, click Cancel up here, and we're going to clear that, okay? If it doesn't clear, you can always click off on that tool and click on another one. All right, so we're just going to crop this just slightly. I want to crop it so we're going to get rid of this top portion of the ceiling. So I'm going to click and drag this in. You can drag from the corners. You can drag from the top down. You can drag from the sides. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of that crown molding at the top. Yes, this will be in here a little bit. That's okay. And we're going to cut him off right a little bit before the wrist, okay? And they are at a slight angle. I'm going to show you how to rotate this lightly. So before you apply the crop, if you hover outside, you should get a double-headed arrow. This is where you can rotate it. I'm going to try to rotate it so that top of that door frame gets level. And then to apply the crop, you either click the check mark or you can just hit the enter key. And we've now applied it. All right, so stop the video and do that now. All right, so that's the crop tool. That's how you straighten, that's how you flip, that's how you rotate. The next thing we're going to do here is we are going to dig deeply into the 2 basic color corrections that you will make in photo restoration, which is fixing your tone, which is the darks and lights, and fixing your colors. All right, that's 2 totally different things. Darks and lights and colors are different things. So we're going to start, you always start with tone first, your darks and lights. You get that under control. And there's 2 ways you can do this. Actually, there's more than 2 ways. I'm going to show you the 2 easiest ways, and then I'll show you some more advanced ways if you still struggle. So the easiest way is to go up to Image, and all of your image adjustments, pretty much most of everything we're doing here today is going to be up here under this Image tab up at the top, okay? Now, see where it says Auto Tone, Auto Contrast, Auto Color. Think of those like driving a car, right? So if you are in an automatic versus a manual, it's going to make all the decisions for you, right? So if I hit auto tone, it may not look like it did much. Okay, I'm going to open up my history panel so you can kind of see it will have changed it just slightly. If you look, I think most closely up in here, you'll see the lights get a little bit lighter, the darks get a little bit darker, right? But I'll be honest, auto tone, it didn't work really well here. So I've got to undo this. So if you did auto tone, I want you to go back to the last step. So open up your history panel, go back to your last crop. We're going to do this manually. Okay, we're not doing automatic. Now we've got to do it manually. So this is your tone. All of your manuals are under the adjustments. So your tone is in this first grouping. There's 4 different ways you can do this. The easiest is levels. Okay, so I want you to just go to image adjustments, levels, and you should get this histogram. So what this does here is it shows you the kind of like at a glance where your tones are. So we can see there's a lot of really dark darks, there's some mid-tone grays, and there's very few lights. What we're trying to do is you want this to level out. You don't want it to be such a mountain range. You want it to try to be as level as you can across the top. The way you do that is you drag these sliders. So you need to make sure your preview button is checked. So it's going to make the changes in here while you move these. Don't mess with this bottom one here. We're only dealing with the histogram at the top. I like to start with the darks first, but that's just me. So I'm going to pull my dark in just a little bit because I want to, actually, no, I can't move my darks in because I don't want to make my darks any darker. What I need to do is I need to make my midtones a little bit lighter. So I'm going to drag that midtone slider. This is the grays. Do you see the difference? And I can see this is before, this is after. See the difference? Before, after. And it's, you have to just kind of eyeball it. You might want to move your whites up just a hair. Okay. Now maybe I can move my darks in the darks a little bit. I'm moving it just a smidge. Before, after. I do a lot of before and after. Am I making it better or worse? Better or worse? Right? And then you click OK. Remember, in these image adjustments, you're trying to make it look better. You're not always going to make it look perfect, and we're trying to make it look as if it hasn't been retouched. Okay, that's the goal here today. We're trying to make it look realistic. I'm just going to briefly show you the other ways that you can fix your tone, and if you want to play around with them, you can. So you have image adjustments. Again, it's in this group, top grouping. Levels is the easiest because it gives you a visual, that histogram, the blacks, midtones, and whites. It just makes it easier visually to understand it. But you can also go to brightness and contrast, and this dialog box is going to pop up. Your contrast is basically, it's going to make your darks darker and your whites whiter. What it doesn't do is it doesn't help you control those midtones. I don't like using this, but this is a nice, like after, like when you're trying to fix something, you just want to make it a little bit punchier, you might use your contrast. Brightness is going to lighten everything, all of your tones, including your whites. So again, this one isn't going to give you a lot of control, so I don't really use that one much. Another one you can use is exposure. I would say width from curves. It just goes, you need to know way more than what we're gonna go into understanding about camera and exposures. Go ahead and click on exposure though. So this does relate more to a camera. So if you've had the photography class or you've messed with a camera before, you know a little bit about exposure. So basically it's the amount of light it's letting into the camera. So this is artificial. The camera's already taken the picture, but we can fake it. So if I push to the right, it's gonna up my exposure. I could also change the offset. So that's kind of like your contrast, and gamma correction has to do with the sensitivity of the lights, kind of like the ISO, if you know cameras. Again, if you don't really know much about cameras, or if you don't feel comfortable, don't use exposure. My two options, I usually go to auto tone first. If that doesn't work, then I go to my levels. Okay, so we fixed our tone. We've got a good balance of lights and darks and midtones. Now we got to start dealing with that color. As you can see, there is what's called a color cast. It's a little too yellow. Again, I'm going to show you the automatic way, and then I'm going to show you the manual way. So we're going to start first by going to image. We're going to try auto first, so we're going to try the auto color. Be like, maybe it did okay. It's not bad. You can undo this completely, or if you want to, you can leave auto color on, and now we can kind of just improve it. So I'm going to leave the auto color on. So go ahead, either leave auto color on or go back in time. Now we're going to make some manual adjustments. We're going to go to image adjustments. We're making manual adjustments, and now you want this second set. Okay, we need to go to color balance. So color balance is going to show you all of your colors, your RGBs and your CMYKs. All you have to know is where are my colors imbalanced at? So in other words, when you look at it, what is it a little too much of? The easiest way to figure that out, I'm actually gonna get out of that for a second. If you zoom in on something that's supposed to be white, like really zoom in tight and look at that color, be like, oh, that's kind of yellow. Okay, that's where you identify what your color balance is. This is too yellow. The image is still too yellow. So to fix that, I'm going to go back to my image adjustments, color balance. It means that I need to go away from the yellow. So I need to drag my blues a little bit. But when I do that, I also need to think about the other colors. So I need to look and say, well, you know what? It did kind of mess with the reds a little bit. And it's just tweaking it by eye. Now we're still going to make some minor changes here. What I'm doing is I'm looking at the white of his shirt. I want to try to get it as white as I can. The reason the camera is having a hard time and you get that balance is because of all the yellow that's in the room. Again, I'm going to do it before, after. I think it looks a little too pink. I'm going to pull that back. Before, after. Before, after. This looks a little too red here. Before, after. I'm gonna say, okay, I think that looks good. So if you want to just copy my numbers, you can type those in there if you're struggling, and click OK. Okay, so now we fixed our tone, we fixed our color. Now we got to talk about fixing the tone and the color just in specific areas, not all over. So we did all over tone correction, all over color correction. Now we need to do it just in specific places where maybe it needs a little bit of help. And we need to use some tools for that. So this is the drawer we want here, the dodge, burn, and sponge. Your dodge lightens, your burn darkens, your sponge has to do with the color. So the first two are about your tone, the last one is about the color, and it deals with the saturation of the color. Okay, so we're going to start first with dodge. We're going to start with the lights. So we need to look at where maybe it's a little too dark. I can't see any detail. And I'm looking in his jacket and shirt here. It's a little too dark still. So I want to lighten the midtones in just this area. So you're going to come up here to your options at the top, and I'm not going to lighten my shadows. I want to lighten my midtones. And I like to start with an exposure that's about 10. You can type it in up here as well. Anything higher than 10, it kind of goes too fast. And you want to use a decent sized brush. You do want to make sure you have a soft brush, okay? Kind of a fuzzy shaped brush. I've got it set at 300 pixels, so you can type that in up here. The reason you want a fuzzy brush is that way you don't get like streaky lines in there. And then I'm just going to brush across his suit here. I'm going to try to bring out some of those highlights in his shirt. I'm going to even say on his jacket it's still a little too dark. I'm going to get rid of some of those. Okay. I can also, if I want to, if I feel like I need to lighten the shadows, maybe the shadows are a little too dark, I can even lighten those shadows a little bit. And then lastly, if I want to, I'm going to try the highlights. I'm just going to bring out the highlights in the jacket a little bit. Okay. If I want to see if I'm making this better or not, if I open my history panel, I can go back to, that's before I did the dodge tool. This is after. You can see I'm making some improvements here. All right, so stop the video. I want you to improve the lights and darks on these jackets. All right, the next up is the shadows on the face. If you notice there is a slight shadow on the face, we want to get rid of that. Again, it's not the darks, it's the midtones we need to lighten a little bit. So we're going to go back to our midtones, and this time we're just going to brush just a little bit across his face here and across his, on the dark side of his face here. Again, I'm going to look, did I make it better or worse? All right, stop the video, do that now. All right, now we're going to do the flip side. Now we're going to talk about what are areas that need some burning, some darkening. So let's switch to our burn tool, and we're going to darken the shadows. We're going to leave it at 10%. I need to upsize my brush. What we're going to do is, like, do you see how in his hair it's kind of washed out? We're going to set our shadows, and we're just going to brush across the hair. We're going to make the tones in his hair just a little bit darker. I'm going to make his eyebrows just a little bit darker here underneath the nose. If you need to zoom in, feel free to zoom in. What I'm doing is I'm just giving it a little bit of pop to the darks so I get a little bit more contrast. Maybe under the tie. We're just getting a little bit of pop. You could always do more, so that's why I do a little bit at a time. All right, stop the video, do that now. Excellent. Last up here is our sponge tool. So let's go ahead and get in that drawer, grab the sponge tool. So sponge tool does one of two things. You can either saturate the colors, which means make them brighter, or you can dull them down. We're gonna start first with saturate because that makes the most sense. I'm gonna still leave it at 10%. And we're gonna saturate the ties a little bit more. So I'm going to go up. I want it just a little, I want it about the width of the tie, so, all right. We make sure we've got it set to saturate, and then we're gonna brush over that tie. We're gonna bring out the pinks that are in there, and we're gonna do it to his tie as well. We're just gonna bring out that color. Okay, so go ahead and stop the video and do that now. All right, now we can say maybe their faces are a little too pink. We wanna take some of the color out. So we're gonna do the opposite here. We're gonna set this to desaturate. I'm going to take our flow way down here for a second. I'm going to go down to 5% because when you're dealing with flesh tones in the face, you have to be really careful. We're going to increase the size of the brush. I want to make this big, so it's not quite the size of their face. And I'm going to slowly brush across that. Now, see that? To me, I already went too fast. I'm going to undo that. Maybe I'm not going to focus here. I'm going to do just these areas where maybe I feel like it's just a little too pink. So I'm going to look before, better, before, better. If I want to, I can even do that in the yellow in the background. So if I feel like that yellow is a little too obnoxious, I can desaturate that. I'm going to take my flow up a little bit more to do that. I'm just going to say that's way too bright because it's just taking the focus a little bit. So you can desaturate, oops, some of that there if you want to. All right, so go ahead and stop the video and do that now. All right, next up is color replacement. So color replacement means you're literally going to replace one color with another color, but what it does, it's not like painting over. You're replacing it, but it's going to leave the darks and the lights in there. So we're going to attempt to change the color of his suit. All right, so the color replacement tool is, I always forget where this is, so give me a second. It's up in here somewhere. There we go. So it's under the paintbrush tool. It works just like a paintbrush, okay, color replacement tool. But what you have to do is you set your foreground color to whatever color you want his suit to be. So we're going to try to match it to his tie a little bit. We're going to do kind of a greenish brown color. Ooh, that's ugly. Now we got to go more brown. Like an olive suit color. If you want to go crazy, give him a weird purple suit or whatever, I don't care, that's fine, but I'm going to make it a little bit more traditional. Okay, so I've got this olivey color here. I'm going to zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. Go back to that. Now you have to paint inside the line. So if I click and drag, notice it's still leaving where the dark shadows are. It's just taking out that blue that's there and it's replacing it with this new green color. So you may have to, the first time I go through with the big brush. I do the center parts as big as I can. Then you're gonna have to make your brush smaller and you're gonna have to zoom in. If you want to, you can use the drawing tablets that are next to your computer. So instead of using the mouse, because anytime you paint, it is a little bit easier to use those styluses. So I'm gonna stop my video and I'm gonna finish this up and then I will be back. While I'm doing that, you feel free to finish changing that blue suit to a different color. All right, welcome back. So I've changed my color. While I am here, I wanna show you how you can use these tools creatively. So because I've changed the color, this blue reflected color doesn't make any sense anymore. So what tool that I've shown you today could you use to remove that? Right, you could use the sponge tool, set it to desaturate. I'm gonna make my brush a little bit smaller here. And I'm going to remove that blue that's in there because it no longer makes sense. And that looks a little bit better. Okay. Oops, I forgot part of his cuff. Do that really fast. Okay, excellent. So we've learned how to replace colors. We've used the sponge tool, the burn tool, the dodge tool. All right, next up is let's quickly review those cloning tools. And I'm not going to tell you what tools to do, but what I want you to do is I want you to remove the exit sign. Okay, you got that exit sign. So I'm going to stop the video and we're going to meet back here in a second. You're going to remove that exit sign using one of the tools that you know how to use. Alrighty, we're back. Hopefully you didn't have any problems getting rid of this. Should have been a pretty easy fix. If you're wondering what tools I use, I started with the basic clone stamp tool and then I used the patch tool over to just kind of blend it together a little bit. All right, so the last thing we're going to cover is finishing filters, and then we're done today, and then I just want you practicing these image adjustment commands just a little bit. So we're going to talk about the finishing filters. So there are 3 different finishing filters you might use. The first one is if you have something that's kind of grainy, so it has what's called noise. So let me open up an image really quickly to show you what an image with noise looks like. So noise is whenever a photographer is taking pictures with a high ISO for like high shutter speed, you'll get this. It's these little teeny tiny pixels. It's a distortion because what they had to do is they had to up the sensitivity of the camera. So it's basically capturing little teeny tiny imperfections. So that's your noise. I'm going to show you the noise filter. You're not going to run it, but I want to show it to you today. So it's under filter, noise, reduce noise. And what it's going to do is this is basically going to blur it out a little bit, okay? So that's your noise. But you're rarely going to be using that reduced noise filter. Instead, you guys are probably going to be using one of two. You're either going to be softening an image, and you most likely do that with portraits, or you're going to be sharpening an image. I'm going to show you both. The first one I'm going to show you is the surface blur. So that's under filter, blur, surface blur. And you can blur it a lot or a little. I can zoom in and out to see what this is going to look like. So to me, I feel like 3 is quite a lot. So you can see the difference already. Usually when you're doing surface blur in a portrait, you're going to blur it like 2 pixels on your radius. You really don't mess with the threshold much, and you click OK. So that's when you want to just soften. So if you're doing these nice little soft portraits, if you do the portrait mode on your smartphones, and you turn it into selfie mode, it's running a surface blur filter on it all the time. That's why you always look better in your selfie pictures, because it's softening everything, okay? I'm gonna undo that. I'm gonna show you the other one, which is to sharpen. Sharpen means crisp it up. To me, I think this image needs crispening. It doesn't need softening. So I'm gonna go to filter, and you're gonna do this with me. You're gonna go to sharpen, you're gonna go to unsharp mask, and it's gonna pop up this dialog box. Make sure preview is checked. If you go too far to the right, it's going to look really, really fake, right? And this, again, it's just kind of like eyeball, and you can go before, after, before, after. You'll notice, like, especially in the facial features, it just crisps it up a little bit. It makes it a little bit punchier. But we don't want it to look fake. So I've got mine set at about 47. Again, I don't typically mess with the radius and threshold. If you feel like you want to kind of meddle around and fudge around with those, you can, right? And click OK. And that's it, guys. So let's review. We did crop and straighten. We replaced a color with another color. We fixed our tones. We fixed our color. We learned about the dodge, the burn, and the sponge tool. We reviewed how to remove an object, and we finished with those 3 finishing filters: the reduced noise, which gets those little speckles, the surface blur for your portraits, and then finally unsharp mask. All right. If you have time, make sure you go back over your notes. Otherwise, practice, play around with these image adjustment commands. There are others in there, and we are going to cover those more in the next video lesson when we talk about creative uses of those image adjustments. Good job.